And before we dive into the workshop, I did want to share just a couple of things. The first thing I want to share is our summer course called Beyond High School. Um, so Beyond High School is a summer course that we're offering. It's designed to equip students with the essential skills they need for college. So we'll cover things like time management, organization, goal setting, decision making, all of these skills that are really it's essential, not for just academics, but also for their personal life as well. And it is open to 11th graders, 12th graders, and college students. And it is in person at our Oakland clinic, as you'll see, and it is in a small group setting. It's a 2-week course. It involves, lots of hands-on activities, gamification, small group activities as well. And so we've really designed the course to be highly engaging and really appropriate for a small group setting where students will have a chance to interact with others who may be, kind of in a similar stage of life. And you can actually register for the Beyond High School course now. And if you go on our website, you'll be able to see all our, options for course dates. And then if you have questions about the course, you can go on our website at Beyond High School, or you can go to strategies for learning /BHS, or you can actually go to just our website and then fill out a contact form, and then you can schedule a call with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the course. And so with that, I like to introduce our speaker for tonight. So our speaker is our SFL clinician, Malik Mitchell. Malik holds a MA and a MS in education with a focus in inclusion from the Southern Adventist University. And with nearly 2 decades of experience working with students from elementary to adult education, Malik is passionate about helping struggling learners to build the skills and confidence they need to succeed. And currently, he works as an SFL clinician. He also works in like a post-secondary school setting, supporting students to navigate the challenges of college life. And then lastly, if you miss this info in the beginning, you can submit questions you have in the chat box located in the bottom right of your screen, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end to address as many as we can. So with that, I will turn it over to Malik and then have him share his screen for his slides.
Thank you, Christine. Very much appreciated. Good night, everybody. How are you all? You don't have to unmute yourself, but hope everybody's doing well.
We told everyone
Doing
to
well,
mute.
doing well.
It's probably not night where you are, so I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. So it's 8:06 where I am. It's hopefully the sun, well, probably the sun has gone down where you are too, but hope everyone is well. I'm really honored to be able to present to you all, whether you're a clinician or a parent. I hope that our time together is fruitful. A number of things I'd like to share tonight, and as Christine shared at the end, answer any questions you might have, and hopefully have answers that you can apply um, in your practice or with your own children. So, just by a quick show of hands, how many of you are parents of a child getting ready for college or in college? And I need to come back. I'm just getting ready to share my screen, so I need to come back to you guys. So, um, how many? Any parents? Okay, not really. How, even though that may not be the case, um, if you have kids that you're working with at some point, the majority of them are going to want to go to college. So hopefully this will be helpful as you help them prepare. Lots of things I wanted to answer. Can you guys see my screen right now? Are you able to see my shared screen? Okay, great, great. So I'm not gonna be looking at you. I'm looking over here at this screen. I was trying to figure out how I wanted to show it. So I'm looking over here. So tonight's topic, unlocking success, executive functioning skills for thriving in college. And that's something that um, for the longest I've been working with the students I've served. Again, K through 12, all the way up to adults. If you've not heard of executive functioning, if you're a professional with us, I'm sure you probably have. But we know that these are super important when it comes to succeeding in everything. And, executive functioning is really just talking about life management, right? And so that's what tonight will be specifically geared toward those getting ready for or in college, but it can apply across the board. So let's get started. So our goals for today, we'd like to just define executive functioning skills a little bit and talk about their overall importance. I won't read all the slides, but I'll read through some of these. We want to identify tips for applying to college and how EF skills play an integral role. This can be a challenging area for students trying to apply and knowing what steps to take. We want to explore strategies for building those skills like planning, time management, organization, and self-regulation. We'll look at a little bit at SMART goals as well and how those can play a part in college success. And finally, for you as parents, I'm going to say myself as a parent because I've got a student in high school too, in college too. We want to look at some key questions that you can ask your colleges about executive functioning supports. So, if there are no questions, let's go to it. So, what are executive functioning skills? Again, by quick show of hands, how many of you know about EF skills or teach EF skills? Okay, I'm seeing quite a few hands there, right? Um, so I won't spend a long time defining it, but they're just mental processes that enable these bullet points: planning, time management, organization, working memory, accountability, self-regulation, goal setting. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, right? I think we've identified more than 20 executive functioning skills, and they perhaps weren't named that several years ago, but we just know them as the skills we need to navigate life. I got to remember that I've got 5 projects to work on in my house right now. How do I remember that? How do I organize my time? So these are very important when it comes to navigating college. So for a lot of our students, this will be their first time away from home if they didn't go to boarding school. Or even if they're doing school from home, as my daughter is, there's still things that we're allowing her to navigate on her own. And how does she put that into practice? How does she figure out what needs to get done and make sure that it gets done, utilizing all of these skills? So we're just going to touch on these here tonight. We'll go in depth with these. But first, we'll start with applying to college. This can be an area, like I said at the onset, of a lot of stress for students, knowing when to start, what to do, and parents pulling their hair out as to why the applications aren't done yet. It's a common thing that we see. So why do students delay applying to college? So here are some common reasons we see. Lack of clarity on what the next steps are, not knowing what to do, something that might seem normal or easy for us as adults, your teen may have a difficult time putting those steps in order. Distractions. I mean, this is classic for the at this time of history in particular. There are way too many things for them to do. If they get on a computer to start their application process, there's a gazillion other things they could be doing, whether it's YouTube or social media. So distractions can delay that. Understanding the importance of deadlines. This is a big one. In high school, we do teach that. We try to make sure students understand you've got to meet deadlines. Um, but deadlines in high school mean, okay, maybe I didn't get the grade versus getting into college. It's maybe you didn't get into the college of your choice, which can have sometimes greater significance or greater impact. Fear of failure. Will I get into the school of my choice? That can be a big fear. Difficulty balancing academic, personal, and professional commitments. Our teens today are involved in so much more than I know I was as a teen. So many of them are holding down jobs. They're on multiple teams. They're in clubs. Some of them are social media influencers. They could have a ton of things that they're doing, and trying to balance all that and still apply to college can be a challenge. Poor time management. This is one I see a lot in my other capacity where I work, where just not figuring out how to dedicate enough time to various responsibilities that you have. Lack of motivation. Let's face it, there are a lot of students who there's some students who it may not be their biggest priority to go to college right after they graduate. And that's a discussion for parents to have with their teens. What are the next steps? And often it's a hard conversation because oftentimes as parents, we want our kids to take that next step. There are some students who would benefit from taking a gap year while they figure themselves out if they're not quite motivated yet, versus just kind of twiddling their thumbs or being in college and not knowing what they want and they're tied to this, right? So looking at the motivation of each student. Lack of planning is also a big reason why students delay, and forgetfulness. This is my friend here. I forgot. You know, he's that's students will often forget that they have these deadlines. So how do we help them get beyond some of these issues? So number one, make sure you start early. I like to tell students, start thinking about it. I put here sophomore year, but even your freshman year, you just start having those conversations with your child about their dreams. What do they want to accomplish, and start identifying programs that might lead them to the career of their choice. And of course, their minds can switch several times, not just in high school, but in college or even after college. But at least start having those conversations, pulling up colleges and applications during your sophomore year. Create a timeline. You're going to see this a lot in this presentation, by the way. So using a calendar to track lines, scholarships that you're applying for, things of that nature. When are their test dates coming up? Staying organized is a big thing for a lot of our students who may have challenges with things like ADHD. You can be a huge support here. Um, creating the checklist of things that they need to get done, what essays they need to be writing, getting recommendation letters. But this kind of leads me to my next one. Using online tools like the Common App can be really helpful. I've worked with quite a few students who use that, and it will send those reminders of what they need to be doing. And then setting mini deadlines. A huge help for students when they have issues with meeting deadlines is chunking what they need to do. So, think like how you would have taught maybe a first or second grader the steps of adding or the steps of division. Sometimes that's necessary to do even with these larger projects. I know I do that for myself often. What are some of the things I need to do to accomplish the major goal? So setting mini deadlines with your student can be really helpful. So those are some really good practices when getting ready to apply to college. Any questions so far, by the way? Okay, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. All right, so I'm going to move away from applying to college and deadlines and start talking a little bit about what happens when you get into college and what are some of those EF skills that are necessary to be successful. So just a quick aside. So currently I work, as Christine shared, I work for a medical school here in Nashville. And you would think, so we've got five schools, so medical, dental, PA school, and then five postgraduate schools and professional schools. And so you think a lot of the students here would have conquered a lot of these issues, and that is so not the case, right? There's so many things that we work on every day. So I'm an educational skills specialist there as well as an ADA coordinator. And students will come in and oftentimes they say, well, I breezed through college and now I'm in medical school. I have no idea what I'm doing. Or just as often they say, yeah, I struggled throughout high school. I struggled in college. I somehow did well on my MCAT. And now I'm here and I'm struggling again. And most of the time, what I see is that there are some executive functioning skills that need to be targeted. And so we'll talk about five or six of them tonight. So mastering time management is a huge, huge one for our college students. And so some of the things you can do, you see the list here. Using a calendar or digital planner uh, prior to the um, technology really taking a huge boost. I remember seeing students when I was in college have their planners, and I just didn't get it in college. People with planners, how do you keep track of that? That wasn't a gift or a natural tendency of mine. But once I started doing that 15 years ago, I really started making a habit of keeping some kind of planner or a to-do list. Things really transformed for me personally and professionally. And now there are just so many options out there. I advise my students, if you can make a planner, have something to keep track of your responsibilities, your tests, everything in one place, It's really helpful. And a lot of students do struggle with it. And I just tell them, hey, try it. If you do it, let's say for 7 days you try it and you only did it 2 out of those 7 days, that's still a win. It's still an accomplishment because it takes time to build new habits. Um, Another thing I suggest there are Kanban lists or to-do lists. So this is an example here of a Kanban list. If you've not heard of it, it's basically a sticky notes online. So you have a list of things to do, things that you're working on, things that you've accomplished, and you can just move those sticky notes all over your virtual space and not on your literal computer, so it doesn't look like a mess, right? So I love using this, and quite a few of the students that I've worked with have started doing this as well. Um, and in both of these cases, to be honest, particularly picking on students with ADHD, but particularly with students who have ADHD, they might come after a week or so and say, I totally forgot to do it. And I say, just stick with me. Let's try it again for another 10 days. Invariably, they really pick up on it and it becomes something very useful for them. Um, Help your students prioritize tasks by using things like the Eisenhower matrix. This is where you just group tasks into 4 areas. So if it's important and urgent, something to be done. If it's important but not urgent, decide. You plan for it. If it's not important but urgent, give that to somebody else, delegate it. If it's not important, not urgent, delete it or delay it at the very least. And I do advise students to try to live in this quadrant here where things that are important but not urgent, because you can plan those, get them again back on your calendar or your to-do list and plan them out. I've got an essay coming up. Let me get first a timeline of when do I want my draft? When do I need to have a draft to my professor? When do I need to have someone else proofread it? All types of things that you can put on your calendar. Keep it in this important but not urgent quadrant. Things that are important and urgent do come up, obviously, but if we spend too much time in this quadrant, eventually we're going to burn out. And I do see a lot of students. This is where the student who crams before a test. It's important and it's urgent, but if they continue this, eventually you're going to burn out, or you're just not going to perform as well on your exams. So, and then I do encourage regularly review and adjust your plans. And as I shared before, don't give up. You may try this for a while, but habits do take some time to form. Staying organized. This is often not a natural state of being for the majority of students I work with, or if you work with students as well, you probably recognize that this is a major issue that we see is that the backpack gets opened, papers are all over the place. They don't know when deadlines are coming, and so encourage them to stay organized. So color-coded folders can work if someone's leans towards being visual. A lot of work I see now, the students I work with, almost everything is digital, virtual. So you have the options that are available at your fingertips to be able to put things in folders. And so I encourage that too. Have a folder for everything and just get in the habit of tucking that information neatly into those folders. I do like to tell students once you're in college, identify a space where you can maximize productivity. Oftentimes, I encourage them find more than one space because if you're someone that is easily distracted, it doesn't take much. So if you're in your dorm room, having your roommate there can be a distraction, and all of a sudden your haven becomes quite the opposite. Or the library. I've had students come to me and complain about the library being too quiet. And so I advise them find those places where you can be productive. It can be a cafeteria, it can be a cafe. Some students like more noise than others, and be thoughtful about those choices and be willing to switch when you recognize what's not you're not getting fruit from that place. Regularly declutter and organize. Revisit regularly. This is something that I know for myself. When I was younger, I really struggled with this. And as an adult, I'm not ashamed to say I really struggle with this. I have to revisit my spaces probably twice a week, whether it's at work or my side of my bedroom. I've got to go like, okay, tonight when I come home, I'm going to be taking care of this. It's something that you regularly want to revisit as a student and make sure that you're decluttering. Here's some apps that can be helpful. Evernote, OneNote are great for digital organization. So, just some suggestions here. And I really like this last one. Be willing to recreate the wheel. I know that terminology often has a negative connotation, but sometimes students reach a point of saturation with one form of organization. So I do encourage students to think, is this, am I successful using this now? Do I need to switch for a different type of class? So practice the metacognition of what is giving them the most success and be willing to switch. Um, not just you know, randomly switch, but a thoughtful approach to recognizing what's working and what's not. Any questions? Okay, let's keep going. Seeking accountability. This is an area, again, with the students I serve right now, a lot of students in medical or dental school, they tend to want to work on their own and feel like it's admitting some kind of weakness if they rely on others. And I always share, think of the different careers that are out there, including yours. What career do you have where you're an island, you're working on your own? And most often they can't really find many. Even in some of the careers where you work by yourself the majority of the time, you still do rely on others. And so I encourage, find a partner, find someone who will hold you accountable. It can be a classmate, it can even be someone virtually that checks in on you from time to time, um, making sure that you're staying on top of the things you need to stay on top of. Help them to set clear goals uh, so that they know these are the things I want to accomplish this week, specific goals. And we'll get talk about SMART goals momentarily, but taking any project you have or any exam that's coming up and have goals as to how you're going to approach it and make sure they're specific enough so that when you look at it, you know exactly what needs to be done and you're clear. Once you've completed that one task, you know that you're completed and on to the next. Pardon me. Regularly check in with a trusted person or a group. I do advise students, even if you're not using cooperative learning strategies per se when you study, it's often good to study with someone parallel to you that you can reach out to and um, as long as they're not going to distract with talking, right? But someone you can bounce ideas off of. They might be able to answer a question. Or if you need to take a break, someone you can chat with for 5 minutes and get right back to work. So that's a really good approach. And then finally, be willing to take correction. If you're not doing something right, be willing to say, hey, have someone step in and say, why don't you try this instead? And not get stuck thinking that your way is the right way or the only way. Be open to guidance from those that have been there. It's good advice for any college student. Okay, I'm just checking my time. So this slide, I really don't like putting a lot of information on slides, but I really did want to park here on working memory. And so there's a lot to kind of digest. Now I'll be quiet for a few seconds here so you can sort of read through some of these. Okay. Now, you may or may not have read all of them. Some of them we've touched on already, some of them you're going to see again, but I did want to highlight just a few of these so I don't go through each and every one. When it comes to improving working memory, so we're kind of talking about learning now, how to retain the information that you're studying and and just remember things that you need to do as well. It's great to have things on a schedule, but you also want to build up your mental capacity to remember some things you need to do and not always rely on what's written down. Um, this is particularly important when you have exams. And so to help students study and strengthen their working memory. Here's some tips. So chunking information, we talked about this, just breaking large bits, large piece of information into smaller, more manageable. Uh, Using visual and auditory aids. And years ago we used to say that, you're either an auditory learner or you're a visual learner or you're kinesthetic. We know better now that we use all of them, depending on what our abilities are. But some folks do lean a little bit more towards the visual and so or the auditory. So know yourself and encourage them to use the tools that will really speak to the area to which they lean. Active note taking. I really want to pause here. I'm seeing a lot of students who, not just where I am now, but even when I was teaching a couple years back, not really actively engaging in lectures or their study. They might just rewrite material over and over. And I think there's a place for that. That handwriting, maybe, obviously practice, but the active engagement of some of these critical areas, using the critical thinking. So when you're taking notes in class, I encourage students to try to rephrase the notes that they get in their own words. So that can be a concept map. Um, I encourage students to see if they can revise and summarize is a term I always use with them. Revise what you've seen, but summarize it in your own words. See if you can truncate it if possible and digest it that way, or teach it to somebody. That's active, even though it's not note taking, it's kind of actively engaging the material. So you're not just rereading it and rereading it. Um, because that often with higher order thinking, we need to do more than just memorize. We need to understand the concepts. And so I do stress that with students often. Practice retrieval is another one I'd like to park on for a bit. So quiz yourself instead of just rereading. Recalling information strengthens your neural pathways. Be sure to get multiple passes at the material you're learning. So, depending on the type of degree one is seeking, you want to, if you know that your degree is going to require you to do a lot of exams, you want to make sure you're doing a lot of questions, getting a lot of practice questions in for if it, let's say it is a science degree. You will need to understand the types of questions you'll see on quizzes and on exams. Practice that. Um, as you're studying the material, don't just study it today and then tomorrow move on to the next thing and you don't look at what you saw today again. You want to make sure that whatever I studied today, I need to look at it again tomorrow, but maybe for a shorter period of time. Maybe I can teach it to somebody in less time. And then tomorrow I want to do it again. Even though I'm constantly introducing new information, I'm always cycling back to old information. I know when we were teaching, we call that spiraling. You're always going back and bringing in the old material. And as teachers, we know to do that, but sometimes our students don't. And so really encourage your students to, just because they learned something yesterday, you know, recognize you're going to see it again, either on the test or at the end of the year. And so make sure you're always getting multiple passes. Um, Mnemonics and acronyms, I am a big believer in these for memorization now. These can be really cool when you're memorizing random information can be challenging. And so I do stress to come up with creative ways to memorize information. And last one I want to touch on is active learning down here on the bottom. And there are many ways we can encourage this active learning. So I just put in SQ3R. Have you heard of that? SQ. Okay, I see some heads nodding. I see some head shaking. So SQ3R, S is for survey, Q is for question, and the three R's are read, write, and review. So I do encourage students, take a look. If you can pre-read, if you get notes ahead of class, or if you're studying after class, just take a look at the headings, take a look at the subheadings, definitions, charts and tables. Before you read any of the text or any of your notes, just take a look at those big ticket ideas. You're kind of getting a 10,000 foot view of what are we about to talk about, because that engages your mind now to know, okay, what am I about to learn? Maybe you see some things there that are familiar to you, and now your mind is starting to anchor this new information to something you already know. So that's the purpose of surveying. Then question, you go through and based off of what you've seen in your survey, create some questions. Um, what is I don't know, I'm in my biology mode right now. So what are the steps of I don't know, somebody help me, glycolysis or something like that. You're creating questions based off of what you've seen, or you're accessing the questions at the end of a chapter. So you use those questions to get to guide your study. Now the three R's, now you read to answer your questions. I remember growing up, teachers would say, don't look at the questions before you read, because students would just want to look at the questions and answer the questions without understanding the material. And now we've kind of switched it because you do want to survey and you do want to look at the questions, but now you do read everything to try and get to those questions. So you read, you write, so you're taking your notes based off of that, answering questions, and then you continually review. So that's what SQR3 is, SQ3R. And then jigsawing, anyone know what jigsawing is? Oh, okay, I see some hands, some thumbs up. So jigsawing that's more of a cooperative learning strategy where you get students together. You want them to be responsible and you can separate, let's say it's a chapter, you have a chapter of 20 pages and you have four students. Um, each of the four will take 5 pages. It can be sequentially, and each of those students would study their section as much as possible and pull out the important information and then teach it to one another. And that is super helpful because you get to you get to teach it and you're going to receive it from someone who's probably seeing it the same way you are. So, but that does require really responsible students who aren't kind of shirking their duty, which in college you hope you'll be able to find fairly easily. All right, so that's working memory. Let's take a look at building self-regulation. So here, practicing mindfulness and stress management techniques, as the stakes get higher in college, you do often see students who really start to just get stressed out and burn out. Like I said, I encourage at our job we have something called Thoughtful Thursdays every Thursday where we offer students to come in whether it's virtually or in person, and we just do 15 minutes of mindfulness, just so they can practice recognizing how they're feeling and how they're responding to the stress levels of school. They can talk. It's a safe space and it can be done on your own. There are tons of YouTube videos that can be accessed on this. I do encourage set realistic goals. Again, you're chunking goals into smaller bits and just keep track of your progress so you're not feeling overwhelmed by this huge goal of a test or a paper coming up. Develop strategies to reduce distractions like focus apps. We'll talk about this in a little bit. Engage in self-reflection or metacognition. You may have heard that term. I kind of see them as interchangeable, where you're just thinking about, what am I thinking right now? You're going into a test. Is my breathing shallower than usual? Um, why am I blanking out on tests? I hear that often. I studied, I thought I knew it, and I got to the test and I could not remember a thing. I was reading this question and I had to read it 5 times before I understood what was being asked. Well, let's think about what's happening. What happened last night? Did you sleep well? Were you thinking about something else? And so give students empower them to really, after the test or prior to this, when they feel stressed, really think about what was going on to cause you to feel that way. And oftentimes, at least what I'm seeing is there's a fear of failure. Um, they've had a lack of success in the past. And even if they're successful now, they're still latching on to an experience from 5 years ago that is now causing them stress every time they face a similar situation. And then, yeah, recognize personal and emotional stumbling blocks to task completion and strategize interventions to combat them. Um, you know, so when students get into a college, they've really transitioned from childhood into adulthood, right? Even at the end of high school, they're really adults, but you're still kind of helping to guide them. And let me just put a plug in. Not every student gets to college and they're all of a sudden adults. Yeah, of course you know that. My daughter is super responsible. She's 18. She's I can really give her a task and she's got it. Um, my boys are 14 and 12. It's going to be very different with them. They're not within earshot, but it's going to be very different with them. So there probably will be a lot of hand holding it once we get to this stage. But what we do is we're trying to help them, even at this age, recognize some of the stumbling blocks to their being successful in school. And we give them the opportunities somewhat to, okay, here's the advice that mom and dad would give. What do you think? Try it and then look for them to see if they're making the connections that, oh yeah, when I waited to do this task to the last minute, I didn't do as well. And so helping them to recognize what are some of those stumbling blocks. Okay, so we're going to jump off of the EF skills and talk about SMART goals, which tie in beautifully to SMART goals. And whenever I talk about this term at my day job, I always hear BJ's voice in my head because we've spoken a lot about SMART goals, and so I feel like vicariously through him, I became somewhat of an expert. I talk about it with my students all the time. So, this is one of the most important things that I do ask students to do is don't just set a goal and not, it's like trying to build a building without a scaffolding. You need something to support what you're trying to accomplish. So SMART goals, if you've not heard, you can see they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Um, and they're extremely helpful. They're not the first attempt that a student makes at creating these. It's not always an easy transition. So be willing to support them through it, but each term really makes sense in and of itself, right? So let's take a look at some examples. So to make it specific, just clearly define what you want to achieve. I will improve my time management by using a planner to track assignments and deadlines. That's an extremely specific goal. What are you trying to do, and how are you going to accomplish it? So this is one that, again, I speak with a lot of students about. If I have a student that comes to me and they say, Mr. Mitchell, I've tried using a planner and I just can't do it. I've tried over and over, and I'll say, okay, let's start with making to-do lists or using the Kanban tool that I showed you. But we need something that's going to help you improve time management. And I don't want to just hear, I've got it in my head, because there are just way too many things for students to hold in their heads sometimes. So specific, measurable. Now set away. How are you going to track your progress? Okay, I'll record all assignments in my planner and check off completed tasks daily. So their measure is daily. Sometimes I tell students, okay, let's start at the end of the week. I want you to look at how much you did, because sometimes students feel a little overwhelmed that I'm not going to be able to do this every day. Okay, let's see how many days you did it out of the week. Let's 5 out of 7 days or 2 out of the 7 days, and let's build on that. Make sure it's achievable. With new habits, as we know, they are hard to start. Sorry, not hard to start. They're hard to maintain. And so make sure it's realistic. I'll spend 30 minutes each evening organizing my tasks for the next day. Um, I often will advise students, you know, if let's say the goal is with studying and they say, I'm going to study 5 hours tonight. I might say, okay, tell me how you're going to do that. Well, I'm just going to go home and then I'm going to get ready and I'll pull out my stuff, and they give me all these things. And I say, okay, let's break this down now. When I go home, I'm going to turn on my computer. So I'm helping them to build momentum to reach the goal. I'll turn on my computer because invariably, if they get the computer on and the professor's lectures in front of them, they're going to start studying. And so we break it up sometimes even into that small of a detail to help them build momentum towards their goal. Make it relevant. So align the goal with the academic and personal success. So the example, improving time management will help me complete assignments on time and reduce stress. Let's not waste time. Let's not create goals that have nothing to do. My goal is I'm going to play 10 minutes of chess tonight. Like if that has nothing to do with what you're trying to accomplish, then let's stay away from that. And you'd be surprised some of the goals that I hear that are just not relevant to what students are trying to accomplish. And then finally, set a deadline. And then once that deadline hits, take a look and reflect. Now you go back to metacognition. How did I do with this goal that I set for myself? And what do I need to revisit? And I will often encourage students, let's try something for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, just so they have some time to see um, they're taking baby steps toward their goal. And invariably you do see that growth and then it's encouraging versus I tried it for a week and it didn't work. Let's scrap it and start all over. Okay, so SMART goals really important. I strongly encourage you to use those with your students. And again, these are great for any age. All right. Now let's just get to guidance. Um, so parental guidance for advocating for your teen. So these are just some questions I came up with that I think of with the students that I see that, parents could have asked us as a school. So I'll speak with students. Up until today, I was chatting with a student and sharing with her some of the resources that my department offers to the entire school, and she was blown away. And I've been working with her, pardon me, for a couple of months. And I know we've made presentations to her group and emails have been sent, but students miss emails. I know I do. Our students are sitting in meetings and things are going in one ear out the other. I know that happens to me as well. So parents can ask and kind of keep a catalog of those things for their student if they see they're starting to struggle. And of course, students can ask as well. But I was able to share with her, hey, we offer tutor-led instruction. We have peer tutors. We have academic skill sessions. And so here are some of the things, they're free. Once you're a student, please utilize them. Come and access the supports that we have. So now she's joined and she has a session tomorrow. Are academic coaches or mentors available across the board? I've not worked with a school, even the smallest of schools, which we are kind of a fairly small school. They're going to have some sort of coaching available. Um, Oftentimes that might be professors, but there's usually some kind of student support department that will be a mix of professionals and peer tutors, coaches, mentors. Something will be available to help students succeed. Does the Disability Services Office provide EF related resources? Oftentimes, they may not be part of the same office. In my school, yes, we happen to be combined, but there's going to be some form of executive functioning resources available, even if it's not called that. It's just to dig and find out where it's located or housed. And let's face it, a lot of the students, if you're a professional here with us, SFO, a lot of the students we work with do have some sort of learning disability. And so they can still be more than successful in college. Part of my role, the other half of my role is I am the ADA coordinator at my school. And so oftentimes I double dip with students where we're doing academic skills, but I'm also helping them to get extended time on a test or um, flexible deadlines in some of their classes. And this is, it's graduate school. So these are offered from, as you know, the lower grades all the way up through professional studies. So the resources are there. Are there workshops on time management and study skills? We definitely offer that, and I know of a lot of schools that do as well. Just find out where they are as a parent. And then what accommodations are available for students with EF challenges? This would be a great question to ask if you know your son, your daughter has ADHD or is perhaps on the spectrum, ASD, generalized anxiety, any of those diagnoses that could lead to some challenges with some of the executive functioning skills that we've talked about tonight. Find out what accommodations they can receive and what's the process because it can be in some schools it's fairly easy and some schools it's not. Like I said, I'm a half-time position and I'm the only person that's working with accommodations of a school. We've got, a couple thousand students. And so it can be challenging. I spend a lot of time with accommodations, but that's changing because we recognize there's a need and we want to serve everybody and make sure we level the playing field for our students with disabilities. Okay, we're almost done. And this is the one I kind of wanted to spend time with, especially if we had parents that whose students are just entering college or even still applying right now. That's I'm just going to speak for myself. Transitioning from directing my child's activities to supporting my child's activities, partnering with them. That can be a challenging jump for parents sometimes when you've been accustomed to telling them what to do. Um, and saying, yeah, this is the way. This is the way you got to do it. And now your child has an opinion on how things should be done. And as parents, we want to encourage that. We want to encourage them to think on their feet, um, and be willing to come and talk to us when things are not going right. So you want to encourage them to be independent, but give the guidance. And sometimes it's going to be, as we know, unwanted guidance. If you have a teen in your home, they may not want to hear everything you have to say, but trust me, it is valuable. I remember being that kid in my parents' house, not wanting to hear what they said. And some of you can probably vouch for this, but then becoming an adult and saying, okay, yeah, they were right most of the time. So give the guidance, even when it's unwanted. Uh, I love this one. Uh, my wife has an easier time with this than I do, but give your team the opportunity to make mistakes, especially if the stakes aren't high. Let them, it might be the wrong thing, but let them make the mistakes and then learn from it. We know that a lot of lessons are better caught than taught because sometimes you're talking and your child is just not hearing you. Let them make the mistakes where the stakes aren't high, and then those lessons will really stick. Just as a quick aside, I remember wanting to buy my first car, and my dad was just trying to talk me out of it. Why are you going? And I was just so bent on going to look at this vehicle because I heard some announcement on the radio. So he let me go, took his car, and I went and I tried to buy this little, I want to say it was a Subaru, a nice little fast car, and I thought it was going to be a certain price, and by the end of the negotiation, it had jumped, as you would know, thousands of dollars, which I didn't have. And those salesmen let me have it when I finally just said I couldn't do it. And they had me there for like a good 2 hours. And by the end of it, they were berating me. And I was my late teens. And I remember just driving home with my tail tucked between my legs and just I felt so shell shocked almost. And I got home, and my dad was like, "How'd it go?" And I kind of told him, and he didn't make me feel bad about it. He didn't rub my nose in it. He just said, okay, yeah, I figured it might go like that. That's how these negotiations happened. And guess what? I never forgot that lesson. It was caught more so than taught, versus him not letting me go. Um, Provide tools for managing time and tasks. We've talked about some of these. Foster open communication. This age is, it can be tough to raise young kids, obviously, because there's so much attention you got to pay to them and they need you for everything. But I would dare say at this age, they need you more so than ever, because you have life experience that they don't. And so if you can have that open communication with them so that they're open to come tell you what's going on and not fear repercussion, that can make such a huge difference in your relationship and then their ability to navigate some of life's most difficult circumstances. Celebrate milestones together. We have a lot of fun with our young kids, doing fun things and playing. And teens get older and they kind of migrate to their own rooms and want to do things with their friends. And that's a natural progression, but still make an effort to come together and celebrate getting into college, getting a good grade. Let them know that you care and are invested in how they're doing. And then finally, give yourselves, and I definitely mean that plurally, give them, but yourself as well, grace. If you missed the deadline that you're supposed to help them with, because we've all done it. We've all made mistakes, and don't quite meet the mark all the time. And so give yourselves grace. Eventually, that opportunity will come back around, or if you miss something one week, didn't do well on that quiz, another one's going to come. And so be willing to be forgiving of yourself and your team. All right. Again, here's just some helpful tools and resources. You all have probably heard of Khan Academy and Quizlet, Trello and Kanban. Those are two task organizing websites I love to visit. Kanban tools. If you just look up Kanban tools online, you'll find them fairly readily. Some apps I really like: Forest, Google Keep for note taking. Todoist is one I have on my phone. Is task management. Pomo to do. We didn't talk about the Pomodoro method. Has anyone heard of the Pomodoro method? Some of you guys. It's just a study method that where you're taking breaks. You study for 25 minutes, you take a break for 5 minutes, um, and then you come back and start studying again. It's to give your mind that mental break that's necessary. But a student does have to be aware of not letting that 5 minutes turn into 10, 15, 20. So I encourage them to use timers to get back to work. And then a really nice book, a good read, The Organized Student. There are tons of resources out there to use um, to help one get organized. So I'm looking at my time. All right. So just to recap, thank you for joining tonight. We talked about how important these executive functioning skills are to be able to succeed getting into, but also matriculating on through college. Smart goals, again, a big plug for smart goals. Try to encourage your team to use them, and then be willing to advocate for your child. Step in where necessary while you're helping them be independent. You're also there as that fallback for them. And then, of course, huge plug for the Beyond High School course. Many of the things I talked about tonight and so much more will be taught. This was just a quick overview. BJ will be talking about in the Beyond High School course, and will those kids will get a huge boost in a lot of these areas as they get ready for college, whether it's in the fall or in the near future. And then, yeah, any questions for me? I'm pretty much done, Christine. I don't know if there are any questions that
Yeah.
came to you.
Well, thank you so much, Malik. We did have
Sure,
two questions that
sure.
parents submitted like prior to the workshop starting. The first one was regarding her own teen who doesn't recognize their own needs, and especially their need for support around some of these executive functioning challenges. And
Mhm.
she also noted that he's quite sensitive to,
Mhm.
wanting help. And so what's something that you can advise the parent on? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a challenging one, and I'll speak from experience because I was that kid in my teens when I was floundering through 2 years of high school. Um, so a couple of things. See if she can have he or she can have another trusted adult in that teen's life um that teen would have their ear. I might be saying that the wrong way. Uh, Maybe they would have the teen's ear. Anyway, but that adult can speak to that student and give the same, almost be a mouthpiece for the parent, right? Because I know there were some adults in my parents' lives, they're, friends of family who I would listen to a little bit more readily because I was stubborn. I'm just gonna be honest. Who my aunt was one, a couple other friends that would be willing to kind of step in and be sort of a go-between. Also, recognize that, I advise parents to always think back, what was it like when I was their age? And this is where giving that grace can come in because there's so many changes going on these years where you were trying to identify with your friends and you want to be an adult. And so allowing sometimes that student to make the mistakes, as long as they're not high stakes, but sometimes when they are, but you've got to kind of judge some of those things. So ask them, the teen, to self-reflect. How is this working for you? Um, and be willing to have those tough conversations and be the bad guy sometimes. And let's face it, I remember my mom having a really tough conversation with me, and it lit a fire in me, to be honest. My mom was the bad cop, my dad was the good cop. And both, together, their strategy really worked. I made a complete transformation between my sophomore and junior year. Um, but yeah, being willing to let them make some mistakes. If they recognize that there's some sensitivity, be willing to talk about that with them. But it is a battle, I'm going to say this pretty strongly. It's a battle that we as parents can't afford to lose, even if it means, being uncomfortable sometimes. I'm not saying to badger the teen or anything like that, but be willing to have the tough conversation and then let it ride. Let them kind of see where things will go. And if there are other adults that can sort of have that teen's ear, that's often very helpful. Um, I'll just make a quick plug for boys at this age because I've got three kids. I've got a daughter and two sons. I will say, I'm assuming the child she's talking about is a son. Sometimes boys can be a little bit more stubborn, especially in this middle school to early high school phase. And if parents can just ride that out a little bit, oftentimes you see a switch that junior year. Not all the time, but oftentimes you do. And then they begin to recognize as an adult, as they become more adults, wait, I've got some things to do to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And then you allow the child to now, sorry, now the adult, the teen or the adult, to make the decisions that are going to help them thrive. And then you're just supporting. So, but it's a hard transition for us as parents. I can attest to that. I hope that
Mhm.
helps.
Thanks, Malik. And then one final question to end the
Mm,
night is regarding a teen who struggles a lot with performance anxiety, whether it's in sports or
mhm,
tests. Do you have any advice for this parent?
Yes, yes. So I'll tackle sports for, I'm sorry, tests first. They say the best preparation for a test is to be prepared. And I know that's I don't mean to be facetious, but studying as much as you can and being getting a lot of opportunities to I mentioned earlier, see the material, whether it's in different formats. You're teaching it to somebody, you've done tons of questions that are similar to what you're going to see. There's something called spaced retrieval I talk about a lot, which just means you're seeing the information over a period of time, but in shorter and shorter increments. So if I've studied it in depth tonight for an hour, tomorrow I want to look at it again, let's say for 30 minutes. But instead of looking over my notes again, if these are my notes, instead of looking through my notes again tomorrow night, I'm going to close my book and see how much I can recall without looking at it. And I'm going to squeeze every brain cell possible to remember everything as much as possible. And then finally look and see what I missed. Tomorrow I might do it for 15 minutes, but you're just getting many looks at that material while you continue to introduce new material. So that's one, that preparation. The other thing you can do when it comes to sports and test anxiety is envision. This is where the mindfulness comes in sometimes. Envision what it's going to be like when you sit down for that test or when you're going to, well, I don't know if it's football or baseball, whatever it is. Practice in your mind what it's going to look like, how I'm going to react in that situation, and just rehearse that. So it becomes um, almost like muscle memory. You see Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, how many hours they spent just shooting free throws overnight. And, we're not asking our students to be the next Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, but the want to envision what it's going to be like when you're performing so that when you sit to do the actual thing, you kind of know what to expect. And so that can be helpful. If the parent senses that the performance anxiety is, if it's a diagnosis, and see if they can hopefully be enrolled in counseling. They can definitely get help from just speaking with a therapist or someone that can help give them proper tools to address that anxiety, especially if it spills over into just general anxiety and just how to combat that and get some other resources and tools. But that is a common thing that you see, students who will kind of blank out on a test and what they can do to help
Yeah.
would they speak to somebody.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
That sort of concludes the evening. And just one last reminder, a recording of the workshop will be available on our YouTube channel. You can find that on our website. And then if you have any other questions, whether it's about Beyond High School or one-on-one like coaching, executive functioning coaching, just fill out our contact form on our website, and then you can schedule a initial consultation with me. But thank you all for joining us. I know it's for some of you, it's quite late in the evening. We have some clinicians who are in the East Coast. So thank you so much for joining. And then we hope to see many of you, parents, all of you who joined today in future workshops. And thanks so much again, Malik.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks everyone for joining.
Good night.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.